Batman, Arkham Knight. Time and again, I've been asked to review the Arkham games in a retrospective series, but I've always kind of had one reason or another not to. If I said anything too negative, people would get angry. If I was too positive, the review would sound biased and boring. Besides, these are really popular games, and damn near everyone has talked about this series in the past. What could I say that hasn't been said already? Yes, they nailed it with Arkham Asylum. It's the perfect Batman video game. Plus, they even came back around for a solid follow-up with Arkham City. And Arkham Origins wasn't necessarily bad, but felt kind of like filler for the real third game. Then we get to the stunning conclusion in which this series closes with a bang. They'll finally answer all the questions we've had, it'll go in a bold new direction while also paying homage to all that came before it, and definitively close the loop in a way that leaves fans breathless. Except this one wasn't really that. This one just kind of had problems. Like, a lot of problems. Other than the unplayable PC release debacle, no one really reacted negatively to this one. Game critics were all positive, but people on the internet and friends I had who liked the series all went dark. It's like the game came out and then everyone just stopped saying anything unless it was their literal job to do so. Maybe a few people complained that the DLC episodes were short and didn't have any free roam. Some people said that the Batmobile was a little overwhelming. Or some people just said that getting the ending was a pain in the ass. I feel like this game deserves more than just a few mumbles in the crowd of other shit going on in 2015. There's a lot to talk about here. Primarily that this one was kind of disappointing. Okay, controversial statement. It's not as much of a letdown as No Man's Sky was or anything, but this certainly didn't feel like it was up to the quality standard of gameplay and storytelling the other 2.5 games had. Now, I know a lot of people are already gearing to climb up my ass about not liking this one because die-hard fans are called that for a reason, but please, hear me out first. If I haven't convinced you that this wasn't a good closer for the series by the end of the video, I'll practically give you the car. Seriously though, I don't want it, you can have it. So there's a lot to sort through, and taking on a game this complex is a little intimidating. But I think the best place to start looking is to figure out what made the rest of the series so great. Now, Batman has had a long history of video games, and what I like to refer to as attempts at video games. But it seemed like the idea was just never gonna work. X-Men and Avengers games seemed to work out nicely for Raven Software, and Spider-Man was practically the face of the superhero game genre because the major competitors hadn't really come onto the scene yet. Then 2009 came along, and after 2 whole years of development and programming, Batman's cape finally looked pretty good. And the other stuff in that game was alright too, but that fucking cape was awesome. The first thing that stuck out to me when I played it as a wee lad was that it was an original story, but it felt like it could totally just be one of the comics. It could also just be a continuation of the animated series I watched as a toddler. I immediately loved that this story was solid enough on its own that it really felt like it could be used in the canon of both. It gave a sense of authenticity and the story was more engaging because of it. The gameplay was nothing short of a miracle either because they pretty much had to reinvent the wheel with these mechanics. The combat was something we had never seen before, except in Spider-Man 2, and the stealth gameplay made you feel like you are Batman. You had such a wealth of weird gadgets to toss at shirtless criminals, and the more it went on, the more visibly you could see them freaking out because you picked them off one by one like the Predator. Naturally, I sucked at this in 2009 because I was in like 4th grade or something, but I still had fun trying to figure it out. This, along with Infamous and Prototype, really shook up the superhero action genre, and people have been trying to build them based off of these examples ever since. But how do you continue to innovate when you've changed the game and become the gold standard for superhero games? Well, the sequel comes out and just adds cool stuff they didn't have time for in the first one. Open world elements, scripted side missions with cool extra plots, additional story stuff that also has free roam, which is an enormous plus, and a story that was hinted at in the last one, so this feels like a well thought out series. But the next 2 games felt like they had no idea where to go and had to make it up on the spot. This one will be a prequel to fill for time, So drop it on a smaller developer with less money and have them market it purely with the fact that the voice cast is different despite sounding pretty much the same. Now for this one, well, we could, you see we just, Batmobile! Batmobile! The story also feels completely disconnected from the previous one in terms of its villains. Scarecrow is almost a completely different character now for some reason, and the Arkham Knight himself was sold to us as someone who would have witnessed the events of the previous two games. Someone that had been there all along, getting ready to shut Batman down. And holy hell, was it a cool idea for them to invent a new villain native to this series of games? Nobody's done that before with a superhero game that I know of. Of course, all of this was lies to hype up the story before release. I remember a lot of people speculating on characters in this series that it could have been. Perhaps it was a fear toxin-induced mirror image of Batman where he sees a version of himself as a gun-wielding monster that takes over the city and harms the innocent. Wouldn't be the first time Batman battles a ghost of his own imagination, seeing as how every single installment features a fight like that. Maybe it has something to do with the Warden who is possessed by a ghost from the first game. If it isn't actually an original character, maybe it could have even been Joker himself coming back alongside Clayface. They were working together to restore the status quo by making a grand parody of Batman and throwing the city into chaos. Then again, people who have never read a Batman comic in their life and only know the character through quick glances at Wikipedia could stare at this and say it's obviously you-know-who. Which, don't worry, we'll get back to that. Then everyone else, including myself, went into this stage of denial saying, there's no way! That would be way too easy and make no sense. This sentence being horribly prophetic of things to come. Yeah, some shit's gonna go down in the next game. Really? Really now? Well, thanks for letting us all know. Who would have guessed? People are probably wondering, aside from the lying before the release and predictable twist, what is it really that irks me so much about this game? I don't even know where to start. I've written and erased this paragraph 5 times. There is so much wrong with this game. Maybe we'll just start with something simple, the gameplay. Arkham Knight takes the gameplay ideas we loved from previous games and applies them to about 1 hour of this game, then spends the entire rest of the game in the Batmobile. Now, fans were begging for the Batmobile to be playable for years before this came out, and Rocksteady listened. What fans didn't ask for was that the majority of the game take place in a vehicle that is essentially an 18-ton death machine. It's pretty much the main mechanic of the game. Everything that Batman has been able to do reliably on his own for 3 games now requires the use of the Batmobile. Remember running across rooftops, gliding around, using the grapple hook to scale tall buildings? That is behavior that feels actively discouraged now. Every mission finds a way to force you back into the thing.
I'll tell you, just stop!
I also can't begin to explain how stupid it is that all of Riddler's traps require you to use the car in some capacity. We have 3 entries in this series with genuinely mind-boggling puzzles, complicated challenges using the game's physics, or sometimes complex death traps that make Jigsaw look like Jigsaw. I was one of those masochists who solved every single riddle in all 3 games, and now Riddler's so tapped for ideas that he's resorted to just making a giant racetrack. This is the ultimate test of your intelligence. A fucking racetrack that he lets you do over if you don't make the time limit.
Not good enough. Too slow, detective.
Are you kidding me?
What is held but never kept? The hostages are as good as dead, Dark Knight, and there's nothing you can do about it. What is too tired but never needs rest? You'll never be smart enough to get this one, Dark Knight.
Give in, Enigma. I'll play your game, and I'll save those hostages. Oh, shit, the hostages!
Oh, no. You can start over again. Just take as much time as you need. You'll never be smart enough to pass this test, Detective. No, this is impossible! You couldn't have done this! You caped crusading cretin!
End of the line, Enigma. I am the superior intellect. I am smart enough to go in a line without dying. I was smart enough to solve all of your clever riddles and dangerous death traps. I even defeated your treacherous track. I am the Batman. But the message is that anyone can be the Batman. Except I'm a better Batman theoretically than anyone else would be because I'm a billionaire. But still, it's the thought that counts, and really anyone can do it in the end. As long as they just have their heart in the right place. Except Azrael, he kinda fucking sucked at it. You know what I mean? Oh, god damn it!
It's okay, man.
Sure,
they
you
can't
put in
all
a
be
ton of
winners.
effort. I'm proud of you for trying.
Okay,
I'm proud
man.
of
They
you for
can't all be
trying. We
winners.
should
Put in the time of day. So many aspects of the world make zero sense in order to excuse for the Batmobile's numerous logistical problems. Let me ask you this. With the Arkham Knight knowing as much about Batman as he does, would he not have come up with a better way to manipulate Batman than just doing what everyone else does and throwing a million grunts at him?
We know how you think!
The entire city is being rolled by unmanned tanks that are presumably operated by some guy at a bunch of laptops. But what if they're all individually piloted by the militia members? Batman can't blow them up with missiles and bullets now because of the no-killing rule. Or, better yet, just tie random civilians to the tops of the tanks. That way you don't have to train 200 people to drive these things. Either way, the story making more sense suddenly tramples on the gameplay because you can't have epic tank battles unless they're unmanned. And Batman shooting an EMP cannon doesn't exactly sound as appealing. People watch shooting, apparently. Every minor gameplay sequence in previous games is now handled with the Bat Tank. Following a trail of clues that leads you to the bad guys. Do it in the tank! Puzzles with a grapple hook. Do it in the tank! Even the fucking stealth sequences. Do it in the tank! Why does everyone say the gameplay is good? This borders on being hilarious because they actually have you sneaking around in your giant missile-launching car, hiding from even bigger missile-launching vehicles. Did no one else think this was silly? What's up, bitches? I'm here to stock up on Robins. I keep running out lately. I mean, it would be fine if the Batmobile combat was at least fun, but it's just irritating and it feels like it's there to consume your time. The gameplay with it basically boils down to sitting perfectly still and waiting for the other vehicles to lock onto you. Then you just lazily slide to a different direction and they can't hit you. It's boring because it's so hard to fail and it's not very demanding in terms of strategy. Everyone else just sits perfectly still and waits politely for you to move out of their firing path. As long as you shoot at the obvious glowing weak spots on these things the second you see them, they may never even get a hit in. It's especially embarrassing when you put them in a close quarters area and just massacre them. It's good to know the main enemy type of the game can only be threatening if the player falls asleep at the controls. Which might actually happen. Even Batgirl sounds disinterested in the tank battles.
Okay, next hack started. EMP blast prepared. Shoot it. Kidnap me. Kidnap my dad. You'll pay. Detonation imminent, Batman. Take your shot. Take that. Take that.
Okay, everybody, remember where we parked, alright? There's also the numerous paradoxes that go along with every game where a player is allowed to drive their own car. If we hadn't learned from many other games decades ago already, the lesson is that you can't give enough people the ability to drive around however they want with no penalty. They will drive over anything that isn't on the road just for the hell of it. Vehicular manslaughter is a bit out of character for Bruce, however. So the entire city is devoid of civilians and every person on the street is counted as an enemy who most likely deserves to get run over. So let's put an electricity effect on them to imply the car just tased them instead of slaughtering them. I don't need to tell you that being hit by a taser the size of 2 lanes of traffic going 90 miles an hour isn't going to just knock you unconscious. You know what? Let's go do some nice, non-lethal street justice in this thing.
That was close. That man's got...
When Gotham lies in ruin and I turn my...
I don't blame you.
Oh, don't worry, those guys will be fine. It was a non-lethal crushing. Oh my god, his pelvis! What? I'm a monster! I get that they were catering to fans with the Batmobile, but from a gameplay and story perspective, it just doesn't work. Every single aspect of its inclusion in the game makes everything around it make as little sense as possible. I think the game would have absolutely been better if they just didn't use it. Or at the very least, use it once, like that Uncharted mission. Oh, thank God, it's gone! Ha! Take that, you steel-plated incongruity! I guess you're the Flatmobile now!
Don't worry, Lou just made us fair.
Oh, come on! Now, in defense of the Batmobile, if it were used in any other game, in any other context, and way more sparingly, it would be pretty fucking cool. It feels good to drive around, it's fun to smash through scenery at top speed and chase helpless cars with it. And as stupid as the Riddler races are, they're pretty fun to do in the challenge mode. The problem is that it's all in this game, and it just doesn't fit here at all.
Deflategate is the ultimate bullshit fucking outrage of sports ever. It's so fucking stupid. What they did was suspend Tom Brady for 4 days for not giving them his fucking cell phone. And for having a friend who called himself the Deflator. If I got in trouble for all the things that my friends called themselves, I would be finished, okay? Maybe Tom Brady's so fucking classy and such a fucking gentleman that he doesn't want people to know that he may have reflected on his real opinion of some of his co-workers. You know, like guys he plays with, guys he plays against, his real feelings. I wouldn't want guys who I didn't think were very good to know I didn't think they were very good. I wouldn't want guys who I thought were great to know I thought they were great. I'd want keep my opinions to myself. We haven't done anything to address this crisis in domestic violence in the NFL, but the fucking football better not be 8% lighter. And if we find out it is, you're gone for 4 games.
Hey, you ever notice how in all of these games, one of Batman's arms is way bigger than the other? I mean, it makes sense, I guess, just a little weird to include. So the Batmobile is basically a giant rolling lost cause for this game. But what about the traditional gameplay segments? Well, I guess if there's anything I must praise, it's that the combat is at its best. It's so satisfying to take on a room full of a dozen bad guys without breaking a combo. It's challenging enough that you can screw it up, but with practice you feel like such a badass. The only major additions are the use of environmental objects and the inclusion of weapons that you can pick up. If you've ever wanted to see Batman smash through a room full of people with a baseball bat, here you go. Depending on where you're at in the story, you might also have another character along for the ride, and you can switch to playing as them in the middle of combat. They even give you team takedowns. This is a really cool improvement, and it makes for an interesting way for Batman to interact with characters from the Bat family. Which is a nice change of pace considering how he's been alone for every game until now. There's also the addition of enemies that can get back up or be revived by their teammates, making you have to consider which ones are most important to take out first. I guess the riddles in this one are pretty much the standard fare for indoor sections, and I have the same love-hate relationship with them that I've always had. Ah shit, I am super colorblind. Well, guess I'm gonna be here for a while. Now, something previous Arkham games have always been praised for is the stealth gameplay, in which Batman has X-ray vision that you might forget to turn off after a while. Be honest, you played at least 80% of Arkham Asylum with every NPC being a glowing skeleton. Arkham Asylum, City, and Origins all had a lot of work put into the level design surrounding these stealth sequences. And they offered a lot of variety to the way you could suffocate buff, shirtless men with your bulky leather gloves. Arguably one of Arkham Knight's biggest missteps is that the stealth areas are kind of poorly designed. The majority of the floor is covered in the grates, and you might end up spending every single one of these segments just hiding in the ground and waiting to nab people. Almost all of these sequences take place outside and in the open air on rooftops, so the amount of tactics you can use and places you can hide are generally really limited. This is probably because the game has maybe 4 substantial levels that take place indoors. The rest are short side missions or DLC stuff. For the main campaign, the stealth usually sucks. However, in the side missions, they give you areas that are actually well thought out and require you to really strategize again. The best example is probably being the Two-Face bank robbery missions. These areas are some of the best in the game because you don't spend most of them waiting around under the floorboards like a depressed trapdoor spider. The only real addition to any of the stealth gameplay is one new mechanic, the Fear Multi-Takedown. It's basically a big, loud, slow-motion super move that you can do to lay out multiple guys at once. You can upgrade it to affect 5 people at a time very early in the game, and it only takes one stealth takedown to charge it up. So, in the stealth gameplay, the devs gave you a mechanic that basically discourages you from being stealthy and requires essentially no strategy at all. What a great idea! Next, you'll be giving us a cheat button during the puzzle sequences in case they get too hard for everyone.
Do you do a lot of work for Riddler?
Only when you're not looking.
Okay, the boss fights haven't been a strong point for the Arkham series. A lot of them in the first game really just boiled down to jumping out of the way while a big guy runs at you, then wait till he gets stuck in a wall or gets tired or something, and then go wail on him. The second game improved with that awesome fight with Solomon Grundy and the stealth sequence against Mr. Freeze. Now, while the game as a whole wasn't the best, Arkham Origins even had some really good ones, like Firefly and Super Bane. Don't even try to tell me that ninja battle with Deathstroke wasn't cool. Now you got tanks. Deathstroke is in this game too, and his boss fight is a tank battle. We went from this to this. This isn't even a unique encounter, it's just a repeat of the Arkham Knight boss fight with a different voice shouting generic bad guy dialogue at you. You know what, let's run down this as quickly as possible. Firefly is in this game, and you beat him by just following him around until his jetpack runs out of gas for the 3rd time in a row. A professional boxer becomes infected with a virus that turns him into the Joker, and his fight is really more of just a quick-time event than anything else. You can defeat Man-Bat by just hopping on his back 3 times in various segments of the game. The Riddler is not a character you should ever have to fight because it's beneath his character, but he has a big dumb robot that you'll never have the patience to see because puzzles. Two-Face is pretty much just a reskin of a normal enemy type and can be dealt with as such. Harley Quinn is pretty much just a reskin of a normal enemy type and can be dealt with as such. Yeah, the bosses are all kind of non-existent. Hey, the city looks great and all, But isn't it a little strange that Gotham City is composed of 5 separate islands in the middle of a bay, and Wayne Manor isn't on any of them? Does that mean that Batman actually lives in, like, Bloodhaven? Or, according to the movies, Metropolis? Now, this entire review so far has been devoted to rounding up all the poor design choices or just general logical fallacies. And that's really just me stalling for time because I was genuinely afraid to talk about this game's story. It's not because the story is vague or absent. It's that every individual component of it makes me furious because I had such high hopes for it. I'd say this game boasts storytelling on par with the Star Wars prequels. Nothing makes sense, every character suddenly decides to act like a moron, everyone is scuttling around the city doing things for flimsy or transparent reasons, and the villains of the game are once again overshadowed by good old Mr. J. Of all the bad guys to bring back, why not any of these guys? I mean, Clayface fell into the Lazarus pit and you're gonna tell me that had no strange effect on any of his powers? He just died? This is a comic book game, for God's sake! That setup was so easy! Remember that tiny subplot from Arkham City about Harley having Joker's baby and then losing it? Not even gonna attempt to follow up on that one? Anyway, let's begin with Joker's involvement in the story.